Rail Up, the future mobility podcast with innovators and leaders of the ecosystem. Presented by Sebastian Sperker.
Welcome to Rail Up and welcome to this special episode. As you know, we usually talk about innovative and future-oriented developments in this podcast. But today, I would like to do it differently as I'm turning 40 this month. And this is a great chance to look back on the past 4 decades. Don't worry, not about my life, but in railway history. I've invited some friends from different age groups to embark together on this journey through the global progress of railways over the 4 last decades. We will explore transformative developments in rail freight, highlighting key innovations and sprinkle in some fascinating facts and figures along the way. We will also touch on notable challenges, safety advancements and failures to give us a balanced perspective. From groundbreaking policies to digital revolutions, this is a story of growth, resilience and adaptation. Let's kick off with the 80s, our foundational decade for modern rail freight. And let's talk first to my friend Rod. Rod, how you experienced the 80s?
Well, I started the 80s as a student, and remember it fondly making my mixtapes with, unknown bands like U2 and what have you. And going to university, and the highlight of the summer vacation was interrailing into scary communist Eastern Europe. And sort of going through the decade, obviously starting working and getting the highest achievement possible, which was a company car with a car phone in it, which was great, of course, as I was bombing up the motorway and overtaking the good old-fashioned British rail train. So I'm thinking to myself, Sebastian, what was the 80s like for the freight business?
Yes, as a matter of fact. For example, in the United States, the Stagger Rail Act of 1980 was a game changer. By deregulating the freight industry, it allowed rail companies to set competitive rates and tailor services to customer needs. And this reform boosted actually the productivity by over 50% in a decade, and rail share of the freight market grew substantially. And there was the containerization, and this took off globally, driven by the rise of intermodal transport. By the mid-80s, over 12 million containers were being shipped worldwide annually, while rail was playing a crucial role by connecting ports to inland markets. And then there was the introduction of the first computerized scheduling systems, improved operational efficiency. Rail operators began using basic algorithms to optimize train schedules, reducing delays and improving customer satisfaction. While freight advanced, passenger rail innovation indirectly influenced freight rail networks as well, with Japan's Shinkansen high-speed rail inspiring a global interest in rail modernization. And safety advancements, we also can see like the automatic warning system were introduced on many rail networks to reduce collision. And in North America, we saw the first implementation of the hot box detectors to monitor wheel bearings, preventing derailment caused by overheated components. And yes, there were also failures because many of the national rail systems struggled financially during this decade, especially in developing countries due to outdated infrastructure and lack of investments. And there was an attempt to introduce new passenger services in the US, like Amtrak Metroliner, often failed to achieve profitability, leading to services cutbacks. So, a key fact, by the end of the 80s, the US rail network carried nearly 1.5 billion tons of freight annually, emphasizing the importance of rail in logistics. Let's jump to the 90s, and before we start with rail, I invited Anniko. So Anniko, can you just tell us your personal experience in the 90s?
Thank you, Sebastian. So yes, back then I was very young, and I have a very nice period of my life finishing the university and have started my professional career with big plans on the field of railway. And it was very different compared to nowadays, especially that we were using fax machines, typewriters, and the famous white error corrector in our daily work for what would be very weird today. And I can say that that time I also did not know yet that I will be so lucky that my job will become my passion, and that's what I'm very grateful for. And maybe one more thing, what I would like to mention, that besides that was also the first time for me having a holiday in Western Europe at the seaside in Spain, traveling by bus for quite a long time, like 30 hours. And the reason was that before it was very complicated due to the border between East and West. And by the way, another fun fact is that we booked it via physical travel agency because we did not have any online platform back then.
Perfect. Yeah, I mean, in the 90s, the GPS and digital communication system became a critical tool for freight. Because in 1995, it was already possible to have a real-time monitoring of the shipments, and that's significantly enhancing supply chain transparency. Back in Europe, railways underwent a significant privatization and markets liberalization. One example in the UK. Freight volumes increased by 70% following the introduction of private operators, demonstrating the potential of competitive markets. On the other side of the world, heavy haul railway became industry leaders in bulk transport. In Australia, the Pilbara region's iron ore railways carried loads exceeding 30,000 tons per train, and that's setting the global benchmark of efficiency. And rail's role in addressing environmental concerns emerged. Studies showed that the rail produced only 20% of the emissions per ton mile compared to the road. And that's where it started, that rail gets the narrative, it's sustainable and green. And in terms of safety, like the automatic train control system, including speed monitoring, were introduced on major routes in Europe and Japan. And derailment detection systems were deployed more widely, reducing the risk associated with track and equipment failures. And if we talk about failures, I mean, the privatization of the British Rail, while boosting freight, led to a significant challenge of passenger services, including fragmentation and the public dissatisfaction. And efforts to revive rail freight in India during this period were hindered by poor infrastructure and competition from road transport. And one key fact for the 90s, the global rail freight volume reached approximately 6 trillion ton kilometers annually by the late 1990s, reflecting the significant growth in the intermodal and bulk transport. So, and let's jump to the millennium and let's jump to Marco. Marco, what was your experience in this decade?
Thanks, Sebastian. Well, between 2000 and 2010, the globalization trend was at its peak. Facebook and social media revolutionized how we connect. For me, during this time, I underwent a transition from the only thing being on my mind was riding a motorcycle to completing my studies and taking my first professional steps. May I say, a speeding ticket at that time would not get you into jail. My observation is that digitalization started back then is going stronger than ever. On the other side, we are struggling to keep the society as connected and open as in that era. Sebastian, and how do you see the advancements in rail branch during that time?
In this decade, China's rail revolution began in earnest with over 400 billion investments in rail infrastructure between 2000 and 2010. And this includes the construction of the major rail freight corridors. And intermodal freight became the backbone of e-commerce logistics, and by 2010, intermodal traffic in the US had grown by 150% compared to the 90s, driven by the need for more efficiency and long-distance transport. High-speed freight experiments gained momentum, and in Europe, dedicated freight trains operating already at the speed of 100 kilometers per hour. And also sustainability initiatives accelerated. Hybrid and electronic locomotives entered to the market with the innovations like regenerative braking systems, reducing energy consumption by up to 30%. And make infrastructure projects like the Trans-Siberian Railway upgrades reduced transit time for goods and traveling between Europe and Asia from weeks to days. In terms of safety, like the positive train control, in short PTC, a system were mandated in the US, designed to prevent train-to-train collisions and derailments caused by excessive speeds. An advanced in crash energy management system reduced the fatalities in train accidents by better absorbing impact and forces. Yeah, let's come to some failures. In the US, some regions saw like rail freight capacity stretched to the limit, causing delay and inefficiency. High-speed freight projects in Europe struggled to gain widespread adoption due to high cost and limited demand. And one key fact for this decade, by 2010, 2010, China had over 90,000 kilometers of railway, making it the second largest rail network globally and was transporting over 3.6 billion tons of rail freight annually. Yeah, and let's dive to the next decade from 2010 and 2020. And I'm very happy I invited Clementine to give her little experience in this decade. So Clementine, how was this decade for you?
For me, this decade was definitely a mobility decade. I was in Russia 2009 to 2010. And then when I came back to Europe, moved 2011 to Austria, to Vienna, heart of Europe, and then started to discover Europe. The most shocking experience of the decade was probably the Euro crisis and the Brexit news 2016. But all in, it's the same year I started at RAILUPPODCAST, so quite a good year. And what happened in the ecosystem rail?
In 2010, like smart railways and digitalization really became a big thing. And the first smart logistics system became a commonplace with IoT-enabled sensors, tracking, and the condition of goods in real time. And China's Belt and Road Initiative, in short BRI, launched freight train services connecting Asia to Europe. And by 2019, over 6,000 trains had traveled the route, moving goods for 33 billion annually. And then the autonomous trains began making waves. And also on the other side of the earth, Rio Tinto's fully autonomous heavy haul trains in Australia, Pilbara region, became the first of their kind, operating over 1,700 kilometers of track. And the European Union invested heavily in the Trans-European network, creating streamlining rail freight corridors. And then the sustainability efforts reached new heights with innovation like hydrogen-powered trains and electrification of the rail networks. For example, Alstom demonstrated the first feasibility of a hydrogen as a clean energy source. And in terms of safety, like the first AI-driven inspection systems began monitoring tracks and rolling stock, and that's reduced accidents caused by equipment failures. And enhancing fire safety measures were implemented, particularly on long-haul freight and passenger routes. And in terms, if we go to the failures, the development of autonomous trains faced a significant regulatory and technical hurdles, and that's delaying widespread adoption. And the large-scale rail infrastructure projects, like in California high-speed rail, suffered from cost overruns and political challenges. And a key fact, the rail freight volumes globally exceed 10 trillion ton kilometers annually by 2019, highlighting the industry's critical role in global trade. So we're coming close to the present, and now for the decade from 2020 to today and even a little bit further, invited like Simon, like a Gen Z representative. So Simon, what was your experience in the decade so far?
So obviously in 2020, we had COVID, which impacted me a lot. I moved to home office. I finished my bachelor's degree only from home, basically. And also privately, I started using TikTok. So back then, TikTok was really on the rise, and I downloaded it and really had a lot of fun with it at home alone. And then I moved to a new flat, so I had to sign a new contract for my energy, which then in 2021 and 22 was heavily impacted by the Ukraine war, unfortunately, and everything that was happening in the world. And then I started my master's degree, and there I really started also getting into AI. And I also notice now how much different the work is to when I started, basically, now that I can ask ChatGPT or Copilot anything at any time. And what happened in rail?
Thank you, Simon. Hashtag I would describe it with autonomous and green railways. And I just figured out that almost all of the topics were already covered by one of my guests in RailUp. So, but let's summarize. I think, first of all, the digital twins and AI systems are now in operations, and these technologies simulate like rail networks to optimize routes, congestions, reduce energy and consumption, and enhance, of course, the safety. And there is a big project started, the electrification efforts for India. For instance, India Railways aim to become fully electric by 2030, aligning with their nation's decarbonization goals. And then autonomous freight trains are expanding globally. And for example, Rio Tinto's auto haul system has safety travel over 11 million kilometers, and it's showcasing the reliability of driverless technology. And advanced transports like Hyperloop and magnetic levitation are being explored for freight applications, promising faster and more efficient logistics. Yeah, and then urban freight rail solutions are also emerging. Lightweighted electric trains are being developed to deliver the goods in congested cities, reducing emissions or traffic, or what also we learned like underground. Regarding the safety advancement, the integration of real-time hazard detection systems has enhanced rail safety in extreme weather conditions, and ongoing advancements in cybersecurity, that's the first time when we hear this word, protect critical rail infrastructure from cyber threats. And in terms of failures, the electrification efforts in developing countries faces like a funding and technical constraints, slowing down the process. And in this decade, still like the Hyperloop, our system remained largely in the experimental phase because there was so significant challenges in terms of cost and scalability. And one key fact are the International Energy Agency reports stated again that the rail is the most efficient mode of transport, consuming 12 times less energy per ton kilometer than the road. And we are at the RAILUP podcast, so we need to talk at least for some minutes about the future. And I think one of the biggest challenges probably in the next decade will be the infrastructure bottlenecks. So we need to get more capacity on the network, rather with physical upgrades or on new tracks, or like a better organization of how the operation is running today. And yeah, we need to address the cross-border topic because it's still really a big hurdle. And also we need like innovations which are affordable really to get forward. But I would say like the big two keywords of this decade will be the use of AI and the use of autonomous driving. And these two keywords will definitely shape or reshape how rail freight operates today. And that's basically our theme of RAILUP. We would like to shape the ecosystem of rail of tomorrow. And thanks for listening. And thanks also to my guests, to Rod, to Anniko, to Clementine and Simon to be my guest. And yeah, stay tuned and we see you soon.
What's the takeaway from this episode?
My key takeaway from deregulation and containerization to AI and autonomous trains. Rail freight has come a long way in 40 years. It's a story of resilience, adaptability, and innovation, one that continues to evolve as we face also new challenges and opportunities. And that's RAILUP.
This podcast connects innovators and leaders worldwide to shape the future ecosystem of rail. RAILUP by Sebastian Sperker.